change from the standby mentality of the Cold War years to the always-ready requirements of the post-9/11 world hasn't been easy for our Guard and Reserve forces. But adjusting internally to the change isn't the only issue. There are new organizations, such as the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Northern Command, that weren't a consideration when legislation outlining the roles of the reserve components was written. Those and other issues led to the formation of an independent commission on the National Guard and Reserves. And according to commission reports released thus far, a lot of work has to be done to truly make the reserve components an operational force.
That's a huge paradigm shift from being a strategic reserve to being an operational reserve. And yet our commission has found that DOD has not made any of the underlying changes in the laws, rules, regulations, policies, procedures, funding, and equipping to make it truly a ready operational reserve.
One of the Commission's key findings in a report sent to Congress in March relates to National Guard equipment levels. According to the Commission report, 88% of our stateside Army Guard units are not mission ready because of equipment shortages.
So DOD has declared that we have this operational reserve, but they haven't made the changes necessary to ensure that such a operational reserve is sustainable. We have concluded that on current situation, it is not sustainable.
The Commission's final report, to include recommended reforms in legislation, is due to Congress in January 2008. As for the reasons why equipment is so scarce among stateside Guard units, leaders say the force had a limited stockpile of equipment prior to 9/11, and deployments over the years since then have taken a toll.
So as we have sent forces to Afghanistan and Iraq and other places around the world, we've cross-leveled this already low level of equipment fill to ensure that everybody has what they should have when they go overseas, and that has depleted our equipment stocks significantly. When you add the fact that we leave some of the equipment in theater, which we rightfully should do to save time and money for the troops that are following on to them, this exacerbates the problem or even makes our equipment problem back here at home even worse.
Although the fix will take some time, the Defense Department has earmarked a considerable amount of money over the next few years to address the shortage.
We have about $9 billion budgeted for equipment strictly for the National Guard.
Other significant improvements the department's new secretary has committed to are reducing deployments to 12 months and a move to deploy the Guard as units instead of as individuals, something the Guard's chief says his people have wanted for some time.
It's far different if that person, that citizen soldier, were to come home and talk to his spouse or her spouse or their employer and say, my unit has been called again and I have to go. It is a much, much different dynamic.
However, Secretary Gates cautions the change won't be easy.
There will be a painful transition period because we've been using individual volunteers over the last several years. And so some units are going to have to deploy early, some are going to be extended. But my hope is that in a year or so we will be to the point where we can begin with the increase in the end strength in the Army and the Marine Corps and these changes in mobilization policy, that we can begin to get back to the kinds of dwell times here at home that we want.
The end strength increases the Secretary believes will help lighten the deployment load add up to about 92,000 more people between the Army and Marine Corps over the next 5 years.
Let's go, let's go, let's go!
Meanwhile, the ultimate goal all Guard and Reserve leaders are reaching for is a force of men and women trained, equipped, and ready to go when called.
Nowadays, you're not going to have the time to do a lot of training after you get alerted. You're going to have to be ready.
In turn, the groundwork is in place to give everyone who serves the predictability they so desperately want. Once fully implemented, our military men and women will become eligible for deployment once every 5 years.
And we're not there yet. We're spinning faster than 5 years because we don't have the force balanced right now. We're still learning. This is a different war.
What we had were a whole lot of Guardsmen and Reservists in specialties that were the kind of specialties we needed in the 90s or prior to that, but they weren't the kind of specialties we need today. And what we really need today, and probably over the next few years, next 10 to 20, are military police, civil affairs, engineering units, air units.
Mr. Hall says the conversion of 125,000 Guard and Reserve positions identified as obsolete is underway.
We have about 80,000 of that done today, so we need to rebalance and get the force to reflect what we need. And at the end of the day, the question will be, when we rebalance and when we civilianize a lot of functions, is the military large enough?
Determining how new technologies will be incorporated into the Guard and Reserve forces of the future is another consideration for military leaders. For example, the new NV-22 Osprey the Marine Corps is getting ready to deploy.
And at some point, 5, 6, 7 years from now, those V-22 pilots or maintainers some of them will decide that they're going to transition from active duty. Now, if we don't have a capability of the MV-22 and the reserve component, what are they going to do?
Another challenge the reserve components face is the impact of the 2006 base closure and realignment mandates. Across the force, many units and some bases are being deactivated and closed. And for the Navy and Air Force reserves, which have also been directed to reduce their numbers by about 7,000 each, the pain will be that much greater over the next few years.
We're going to affect about 15,000 people's lives through base closure and the personnel cuts, so it's significant.
People are the DoD's most costly resource, but even as the personnel reductions save money, they're also made feasible by improving technology. For example, Navy cruisers in World War II had 1,100 crew. The cruisers of today have a crew of 450.
Just because we're coming down doesn't mean it's worse, it just means we're getting smarter about the way we do business.
And because today's conflicts are very different from those of the past, the Navy is also changing where it takes care of business.
I mean, it's coming from the deep blue water to the green water, and then we call it brown water where you go up the rivers. So we're building some of the old brown water riverine force under Navy Expeditionary Combat Command.
But even as monies are doled out for new equipment and adjustments are made to how the reserve components operate, recruiting the right people to take care of the mission is always an underlying concern. And some are worried over what the future holds in store.
We've done some research here in Navy through the Chief of Naval Personnel. 72% of our nation's youth are now ineligible for military service for a wide variety of reasons. Start with just not in physical shape, don't have the skill sets, tattoos, drug use, criminal, and parents who don't want their kids to serve in an economy that's doing pretty good on the outside.
Keeping up recruitment and retention, balancing skills to meet today's needs, and reducing wear and tear on people and equipment are just a few items on the daunting list of goals set for the Guard and Reserve in the next few years. But according to the generals and admirals leading our reserve components, the world situation today demands no less than a force fully ready to respond when and where it's needed.
We will look back 5 years from now, and these will be the good old days. If we think we're busy now, I think we're going to be more essential and even more busy in the years to come.
It's impossible to detail the myriad ways the Guard and Reserve are serving around the world in one half-hour program. Still, it's easy to see they're taking on a big part of the burden of today's military operations. And they, too, are facing the greatest dangers. Of the nearly 3,600 lives lost in Operations Iraqi and Enduring Freedom, more than 700 are citizens who chose to serve in our Guard and Reserve. I'm Master Sergeant Daniela Marcus. This has been Recon.